name is Ginny Cosgrove and I work with the Planning Commission. Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Ginny Cosgrove puis je travaille avec...
Hello, I'm Ginny Cosgrove and I work with the Greater Moncton Planning District Commission, and I'm really happy to be here with you to give you an update on the PlanMoncton project.
What we have for our agenda tonight is that I'm going to give you a brief overview as the first part of the agenda on some of the work that the committee's been doing over the last little while. And as Councillor Henderson mentioned, a big part of inviting you here today is to check in, it's to find out if we're on the right track. With that in mind, I think what I'll do is just take a couple minutes just to talk a little bit about PlanMoncton. PlanMoncton is a project that's going to update the city's municipal plan. And that plan lays out a long-term vision for the future development of our city. It influences how and where development takes place by outlining the city's planning goals, its objectives, and by outlining the city planning policies of the city. And then those policies in the municipal plan then influence other bylaws that the city uses, such as the zoning bylaw or the subdivision bylaw. So it's a guiding document that other bylaws then take direction from. But it's much more than a policy document. Really, at the end of the day, it outlines the city's social, cultural, economic, and environmental priorities. PlanMoncton is our community's plan. The PlanMoncton Committee, some of whom are here tonight, were appointed by City Council to work with the Planning Commission in proposing a new plan to City Council. And the process of developing this new plan relies importantly on the input of the community, as well as technical advice from staff from the Commission and the City. This process started earlier this year when the committee asked Monctonians to help develop a PlanMoncton vision. We were very pleased with the response that we received, and through a variety of different activities, Monctonians of all ages and backgrounds shared their priorities for the way that the city should develop in the future. And for those of you who attended the open houses that we held at the start of this process, one of the things we did was we asked folks to feel free to share their ideas on little post-it notes based on different themes. And we weren't really sure at the start how that process was going to work out, but we ended up getting thousands of ideas from the community through that process and through the online website activities that we had. And so what we did with all that information is we grouped it by themes and provided the committee members that information. So as they went along and discussed different topics in their meetings, they also had all those ideas from the community at their disposal. As I mentioned, we also had a 3-day visioning event at the Capitol Theatre, and that was a chance for us to come together as a community and to start talking about planning principles and priorities, fairly high level, but important principles, talking about our values as we develop this plan. All of the consultation that happened during that time is all summarized in a report that we presented to City Council in June. And that report's available on the project website, planmoncton.ca. If you haven't had the chance to have a look at it, you can go online and access that report there. The ideas and the vision that were shared by the community through that consultation could be described through these 9 key principles. Embracing nature, planning around the needs of people, recognizing the diverse needs of the community, and thinking about those people that are the most vulnerable in the community. And one of the ideas, one of the concepts that we often talked about was the notion of planning for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old. And that if we thought about what life was like for those 2 types of individuals, that we might actually be able to capture and plan for a whole variety of needs, probably meet most of our needs that way, if we think about those two individuals. Another principle has to do with celebrating and enhancing the uniqueness of our community, thinking and preserving our history, as well as thinking about our uniqueness and where we're headed, what our future is about. It's about, another principle is about creating a more sustainable city, a city that's more walkable and transit-oriented, where people meet more of their needs closer to home. Reviving downtown, that heart, the civic center of the city, and managing growth well and focusing on those things that long-term are going to bring benefits to the community. We talked about the need to have a strong vision, a long-term vision, and a vision that requires bold leadership, creativity, and partnerships to succeed. What I'd like to do now is focus on 5 of these key principles that really talk to land use planning in particular. And these are the 5 themes that your survey is framing. Protecting our environment is a fundamental principle of PlanMoncton. Our city is made up of a system of watersheds that includes rivers, creeks, and other wetlands. And though the province is primarily responsible for environmental protection, the city has also been playing an active role by ensuring that the Turtle Creek and the McLaughlin Reservoir areas, which we're dependent on for our drinking water supply, that those areas remain healthy and sustainable. The city owns thousands of acres of forestry land that it is actively involved in sustainable forestry practices with. And by linking these efforts with science-based research and education, the city's helping to create a better understanding of the importance of our watersheds and opportunities to lessen the impacts on our natural environment. The city's urban forest activities also extend into our local parks, our streets, where each year the city budget allows for the planting of new trees. Right now, some 300 new trees are planted each year. One of the things we learned through PlanMoncton was how important trees are to the community for so many reasons. And we've been looking at ways in order to increase the number of trees planted and preserved through new development. With all these various efforts that are underway, it's also been suggested that the city create an urban forest plan that can help coordinate and put in place a long-term management plan for the city's urban forest. The city recently adopted a Parks and Open Space Master Plan, and we have copies of that plan out in the lobby. And a key concept of that plan is creating a system of greenways throughout the city. A greenway system that links and helps to preserve the wetlands and the river systems that we have in the city, as well as other natural features. And you'll be able to have a look at that plan. It's a key piece of the puzzle in terms of being able to create a greener city. The topics of energy and climate change have also been talked about, are important ones, and the city has been taking a number of actions as a corporation to reduce its energy consumption, its carbon footprint, and to understand the potential implications of climate change on the city. Of the 5 topics listed here, energy, climate change is by far one of the newer topics to the municipal plan. We have in the survey a number of ideas that we'd like to get your feedback on relative to that topic. The next theme is complete streets. These are streets that cater to everyone. Walkers, cyclists, folks that are driving their cars and folks that are taking the bus. So it's really thinking about that broad-based need across the community. Transit was the second most mentioned topic I mentioned that folks had the chance to write down whatever topics that, ideas came to mind earlier in that process. Transit was the second most mentioned topic. And we learned how important transit is for so many of our citizens today, and also how important it's going to be in the future. The city's going to be undertaking a sustainable transportation plan over the next couple of years. The city has currently a transportation plan, has had one since the 1970s. It's been a tri-community plan, and it's been updated every 10 years. And it's about 10 years old now, so it's due for an update. And that project is due to get off the ground sometime early next year. And it's going to play a really important role in terms of moving forward on a lot of the ideas that we've been hearing through PlanMoncton. The city commissioned a transit study. It's called the Dillon Report. And it provided a number of recommendations for transit services and transit planning. And what we've been focusing on in PlanMoncton is what we can do to support transit better from a land use planning perspective. One of the ideas being that we can begin to structure our city a bit better around transit by taking a closer look at our centers and our corridors. So centers being those places, those gravitational pulls where people are trying to go to, and the corridors being those main links that connect all those centers. And how do we start planning and designing those areas so that they work better from a transit perspective? Many cities are beginning to look for ways of encouraging housing within an easy walk of these corridors and centers as a way of making transit service more efficient. You have more people sharing the same line, you can run more lines, it can have more frequent service, and that kind of thinking. And transit planners are also paying attention to how the actual street is designed in order to facilitate transit movement. But equally, they're paying attention to how we're designing for pedestrians. It's reasonable for a person to walk 5 minutes to access a transit stop. And the more comfortable that we can make that walk and make the environment where that transit stop is located, then the easier it's going to be for that person to use transit, the more supportive we can be for transit. So urban design and the city's active transportation strategy, which is a strategy which you can also see a plan out in the lobby. It shows trail networks and links, all those active routes throughout the city. Those two elements of urban design and that active transportation planning are really important and correlate really importantly with transit planning. Lastly, as part of the PlanMoncton project, from a transportation perspective, we've also had a look at the road network, the city road network. And Stefan Thibodeau, who works with the city's engineering department, has been helping us to understand how the road system could be completed in the future. We also have another map out in the lobby if you're interested in talking about some of that long-range street system. Complete neighborhoods is the next theme. And as a committee, we spent actually quite a bit of time talking about our neighborhoods, talking about how unique the neighborhoods in Moncton are, and also talking about how we can plan and help our neighborhoods adapt in the future so that we can meet more of our community's needs over time. Our neighborhoods are always adapting, always changing in some way. And so how do we guide that in a way that's going to bring the most benefits for the community? We heard from the community how proud they are of the neighborhoods, but also we heard that there are definitely ways in which we can improve them. We know our demographics is changing in a big way for the next little while, and we have heard a lot through this process about the needs of seniors in particular. And how there's an interest not only in terms of meeting needs for housing, but also thinking about those other needs for support and care and having access to, be able to walk to a shop, to not feel isolated. This is the kind of discussion that we've been hearing from the seniors community. And so how we start to think about our neighborhoods in a way that's perhaps more social so that we're not isolating folks in the community is something we'll certainly be thinking about. We've also heard from families through this process, equally so, how neighborhoods could be more supportive of their needs. I was recently involved in a workshop in the Northwest where residents are looking at wanting a new community center up that way. And during that workshop, folks were saying how important it was for that neighborhood center to be located in the right spot where most people could access it, where people could walk and cycle there, and it was part of the community and a focal point. And so that kind of conversation about having those places in our neighborhoods where people can get together and where there's a distinct sort of identity, focal point, gathering place for the neighborhood was a theme that we certainly heard. The Planning Commission also accessed some funds to undertake some consultation on the question of affordable housing and housing choice. We had the opportunity to meet with a whole bunch of stakeholder groups in the community who are out there trying to provide housing needs that are harder to meet. And we certainly learned a lot from them in terms of the challenges happening with respect to housing, but they also brought up other needs for families. Not all families, for instance, can afford to have their children involved in recreation programs. And so again, thinking back to how we design neighborhoods, how we create open spaces and opportunities for youth that aren't necessarily programmed or necessarily coming at a cost, and thinking about how our neighborhoods can provide for a whole variety of needs. We've talked about, as a committee, about how important the design of neighborhoods is in terms of parks and schools and these other facilities in our neighborhoods that provide an important focal point and opportunity for active living and education. So as we talk about all these neighborhood concepts, how do we actually plan and help our neighborhoods adapt? And so as a committee, we've talked about the importance of having neighborhood planning processes in existing neighborhoods where we can be working with residents and identifying local issues, local opportunities, and helping that neighborhood develop a plan for how they'd like to see their area move forward. And for greenfield areas, those new areas that are developing, the population's not there yet, but how do we put in place an overall vision for that new community that helps to ensure that we have parks and open spaces in the right places, and those trail systems, some focal points, and that we start to talk about how to provide for a variety of housing in neighborhoods. And so the concept of exploring more the notion of carrying out neighborhood plans for new areas was also discussed. So transit was number 2, and downtown was number 1. Downtown was the number 1 topic that was raised through the PlanMoncton consultation. Without a doubt, the downtown is our most important mixed-use center in the city. It's the heart of the city. We had a little map and we asked people, where's the heart of the city? And it didn't take them long. It always came downtown. Although some people had it close to home, but I'd say the majority showed red on the downtown. And many of the ideas that were shared with us are actually ideas that are captured in some format within the city's downtown vision plan. So the city has adopted a plan for downtown. It's currently part of the municipal plan. And a lot of the ideas are captured in that plan. They're also captured in a cultural plan, that was adopted by the city recently as well. And so it seems that we have a strong vision and a strong plan. And a lot of what we heard was on how important implementation of those plans are right now. So the downtown strategy is really based on creating the right environment downtown for redevelopment to take place. Focuses on reusing those underutilized buildings and identifying sites where we can increase densities downtown. Very importantly is developing a residential population. It's also about connecting our riverfront to the downtown, and that certainly was something that we heard through this process again. It's part of the current plan. But certainly looking for more opportunities for that. And also rethinking how we can use our streets, our public spaces downtown to the advantage of residents and visitors and businesses downtown. Continuing to look for opportunities to showcase downtown and to attract people to spend time downtown. The city and DMCI are working very diligently on that downtown vision plan, and we are seeing results. We've been hearing that people are very pleased with how St. George is progressing. And we're also seeing change along the riverfront, along Assumption Drive, but no doubt there's still a lot of work to do. One of the things that the committee revisited was the planning boundary for downtown. And we have a copy of a plan out in the lobby, which we'd be interested in having a look at. The committee looked at the planning policy boundaries for downtown and thought that there was perhaps a need to start really focusing on what we mean by downtown and maybe differentiating it better from the surrounding neighborhoods of downtown. And so we'd be interested in your feedback on that. A last but really important piece of the downtown plan has to do with urban design and really good urban design. So important in creating a unique, greener, healthier, more vibrant, more prosperous downtown. And both the public and the private sectors have a role to play there. The city's role focuses on city-owned properties, on downtown parks, open spaces, and the design of the streets, all of which define that public realm, that space that the public at large enjoys every day. And the Downtown Vision Plan asks the private sector to partner with architecture, site, building designs that help complete and beautify downtown. And like the PlanMoncton vision, nothing happens overnight, but when you have a vision, when you have a plan, when you have a strategy, when the opportunities come up, then you know what to do. You know how to act. So very important to have a long-range plan and a strategy. The last thing is it's entitled Balanced Density. It's about managing growth. And an important part of PlanMoncton has to do with how we manage growth in a more sustainable way. Trying to make sure that we have adequate resources and the capacity to sustain our population well into the future. Like most cities, we're learning that a more compact city is a fiscally more sustainable city. Urban boundaries are a common planning tool that many cities use to help create more compact and sustainable cities. And the city's had such a boundary since the late 1990s. In the current plan, it's referred to as a serviceable area boundary, or urban growth boundary. And within that boundary, urban densities and urban infrastructure are encouraged. Outside the boundary, subdivision and development is restricted to larger lots and rural infrastructure. And it's within the boundary that the city is focused on ensuring that there's adequate infrastructure in place to accommodate growth. We're anticipating that Moncton's population will continue to grow by some 19,000 persons over the next 25 years. And as part of our background work, we assessed the available supply of land within the existing urban boundary and found that there is sufficient land within that boundary to accommodate our growth over that time period. If we're able to use that land in a really efficient way, then the land supply lasts a bit longer, and we can make much better use of the resources and the assets that we have. So 5 big topics and a lot of ideas attached to each one.